First leadership change in Venezuela, now Iran. Is Cuba next? President Trump says it's just a matter of time. Cuba will fall pretty soon. Pro-democracy protests have broken out there as Trump strangles the Marxist leaders economically. Cliff May is founder and president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Cliff, thanks for being with us. So is this a matter of just waiting until Trump is finished with Iran, or is the transformation of Cuba already underway?
Well, listen, the Cuban government is suffering. The Cuban people are suffering. Let's understand they were getting oil mostly from Venezuela. That's been cut off since the arrest of Nicolas Maduro. I think Marco Rubio, who is a Cuban American, is quite focused on Cuba and would like to see a transition to a decent government, one that cares for the people, who doesn't and wants to see some freedom and prosperity. I don't think this is going to be a fast transition. I think the president and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, both of them have a lot of balls in the air that they're trying to juggle. But I'm sure they are watching, and they have deputies watching very carefully what's happening in Cuba, also trying to see if there is any chance of the Cuban government making some concessions that I think they would view as part of a long-term transition.
So what is life like today for Cubans, say, compared to 1 or 2 years ago?
Dreadful. First of all, the economy was in very bad shape anyhow, even before all this. For the last 3 years or so, GDP was down. It wasn't good. But with the energy cut off, very, very difficult. You know, you've all seen pictures of Havana with cars from the 1950s that they somehow make still run. Those cars probably don't have gasoline now, and they're probably not running, even if the engines have been repaired numerous times. It's very tough. Now, one thing I think we don't want to see, Cubans getting into boats and trying to get themselves to Key West. People may remember years ago the Mario boat lift, may remember Cubans. Again, the Cubans who have come to America, they're great American citizens. I visit Miami a lot. They've transformed the city in wonderful ways, but I don't think we want to see a mass exodus all at once. But it's getting very tough on the people of Cuba. They are suffering, but I think President Trump correctly holds the rulers of Cuba. This is still a Castroite regime under President Diaz-Canel. I think he holds them responsible and is essentially saying, do you want to do something for your people? I'm not sure you do, but if you do, talk to me. We do think that there are talks quietly going on. We don't know much about them.
Well, it's good to know that Marco Rubio's in charge of that. Like Iran, the Cuban government and military have all the guns. So how would regime change happen in Havana with an uprising of the people who are fed up with the status quo? How could they do that without guns?
That's always the difficulty. Yeah. Whoever has the guns retains control. What I think it's possible to envision is the Cuban government saying, look, the strains on the people are too much. You understand that. What can we do that will allow you to help us? For example, with renewed flows of oil. The president might say, well, first of all, I'm going to give you a list of people who you're holding as prisoners of thought in your prisons. I want to see them released. And as soon as they are released, oil will begin to flow again to Cuba. And if there are protests in the streets, I want you to allow those people to peacefully protest. I don't want to see you doing what they've done in Iran, which is the rulers slaughtering by the thousands, in Iran, by the tens of thousands, unarmed, peaceful protesters. Now, if you make those two concessions, we can start a dialogue, and we can see what we can do for you and for the people of Cuba. Does that ensure a transition? No, but I think if you look at the way President Trump and Marco Rubio view these things, these transitions are not meant to be sudden. That's difficult to do. They're meant to be more of an evolution than a revolution or even a counter-revolution.
Well, you mentioned Iran. There you have a devout Shia Muslims entrenched in institutions. In Cuba, you've got committed Marxists who are entrenched in the bureaucracy. So what is Trump's strategy? How could there be real change there just by swapping out leaders?
I think he's looking initially for more pliable leaders rather than for leaders who think, wow, it wasn't Thomas Jefferson, great, we have to model that. Again, look at Venezuela for the model. Nicolas Maduro is in a jail cell in Brooklyn, New York. His number two, Delcy Rodriguez, she is running things. Is she a Marxist, a Chavista? In other words, a follower of Hugo Chavez,
Sure.
the revolutionary communist leader? Absolutely. Did he have Cuban bodyguards? Yes, he did. Probably 32 were killed when Maduro was taken. Is she more pliable? I think she is, because Trump has communicated to her, look, if you're cooperating with us, that will be very helpful. If not, there probably are other jail cells I can find for you in Brooklyn, New York.
But Cliff, you talk about Venezuela with Delcy Rodriguez in charge. Now, she comes from a deeply leftist family. Her brother heads the National Assembly. Many of Maduro's leftist allies and thugs are still in the military, still in the government. How will democracy take hold there with all the same people and all the corruption still in place?
Difficult to envision, but and all I can tell you is of what I think Marco Rubio and President Trump foresee is a gradual transition. They don't want to do it suddenly. Why? Because if you put in somebody from the opposition, a Democrat, what do you do with all the people who are actually running the bureaucracy, running the military, running the interior security forces, running the police force? They won't. This gets back to what you were saying. You put somebody in that you like, and unless you're going to put your troops in to maintain order, the guy or the woman you put into power won't have any guns behind her. So they're thinking of a longer process. And again, it's kind of a new experiment in how you do this. Again, they're thinking of the regime not being changed suddenly, but being changed gradually over time. And we don't know entirely how this comes out, but would it be an entire surprise if 5 years from now democracy is restored in Venezuela? They did have democracy before. Prosperity is restored. They have plenty of oil. Would it be a tremendous surprise if the people came out and protested in the street in Cuba and the government didn't shoot them, and so they were able to take over? Again, there's a lot of things we don't know, a lot of things I don't have crystal balls, can't predict, but I think I do understand basically what President Trump and Marco Rubio are doing. They're saying, you have to understand that we want to see certain changes. They don't all have to come at once, but if you want our cooperation, that will be necessary. Consider what President Obama attempted to do. He went to Cuba. He was solicitous of the regime. He didn't mind that his picture was taken in front of a portrait of Che Guevara, the terrible revolutionary leader. He got no concessions whatsoever. This is a different approach. I'm not going to tell you for sure it's going to work. I do think it's fascinating to watch.
Well, I think we learned our lesson from Iraq, that you don't just get rid of all the military leaders and try to evict all the bureaucrats and look what happened. Then you ended up with ISIS and an insurgency there. So 12 Latin American and Caribbean leaders, Cliff, gathered with President Trump in Doral, Florida last weekend. How important was that inaugural Shield of the Americas summit? What do you think was accomplished there? What difference will it make for the region?
Yeah, I think we know that what President Trump is saying is, look, we are going to be the most important foreign influence in South America, Latin America going forward. This is part of what he can demand of the Cubans, by the way, is we want you to stop interfering in other Latin American nations with troops, with communist ideology. You better concentrate on your own people, nothing else. And you no longer have Venezuela as a sponsor. Of course, you no longer have the Soviet Union as a sponsor. President Trump wants China no longer to be a major influence. They have been gaining influence very quickly and all throughout Latin America. Hezbollah and Iran, big influences. Russia is still an influence in Latin America. Essentially, he's telling them, we want you to be independent, but with influence from us. You need our help. We'll give it. But you need We need your cooperation. We expect you to give it if you want good relations with us. This is sometimes called the Monroe Doctrine, based on the Monroe Doctrine. What did the Monroe Doctrine say? It said essentially it was meant to say European empires will not be allowed to have influence in Latin America because the Western Hemisphere, the United States will have the most influence. That's what the Monroe Doctrine did. It wasn't pro-imperialist, it was anti-European imperialist. And President Trump is sort of enforcing something, I would say, similar at this point. Think of the Panama Canal, for example. I think there is not a doctrine, at least a view of how this should unfold over time. At one point, I talked to the head of the Latin American Interdevelopment Bank, who was under Trump in the first term, and he said, my job, what I was trying to do was to stop Chinese investment and debt traps in Latin America, and it was a full-time job. I'm sorry to say he was fired the first day that Joe Biden came into office.
Well, you can ask the Africans how that worked out for them with China. The debt traps, yeah.
Is working out.
Yeah,
is working out. That's
working
still
out, yes.
Yeah, no, Africa, look, Africa is another subject, but the French have been driven out of numerous countries, and they've been replaced by Russians, by Chinese, and frankly also by the Iranians, although I think their influence is going to be diminished internationally as a result of what's going on right now.
Okay, Monroe Doctrine was Europe out of the hemisphere, and today the Monroe Doctrine, China out. Cliff May, FDD president, thanks for taking the time to share your insights. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to be with you.